All right, so to that point, I believe that I will then come to our panelists here. Uh, Please, if you don't mind, each panelist can give us a maximum of 2 minutes of your assessment of the overall conversation. And if there is any question that you directly want to throw to any of our presenters, you are welcome to do that. And then I have a bunch of questions here. I think I have about 25 questions here that came in from the internet as well. So let's begin with Honorable Nana. If you want to, please go ahead and begin with us.
Thanks so much for your work so far. Yes, about the man who spoke about, that's Mr. Joseph Amankra. Yes, you started your submission by talking about how all energy sources, even alternative energy sources, being not free of energy costs. And then you went ahead to develop your points on the other alternatives that you have developed or you are conversant with. So I don't think I'm the only one who will be having, some difficulty understanding the bridge between your no free lunch to providing us with sources of free lunch. So if you'll be able to bridge that cause for us.
Thank you. I think you mentioned free lunch, right?
Yes, you offered.
Okay.
Sources of free lunch.
Okay.
Like to the blue skies people, and then
Okay.
the others.
For the laws of thermodynamics, it says energy is neither created or destroyed. And so understanding that, we have to know that energy can be manipulated to another source. Heat is the paramount energy that we produce that changes everything else. And so when I put forward to you the circumstances of where energy is produced, such as green energy just does not exist by itself. There's other energies in place to produce it. And so the solar panels have to be made. It needs energy to turn the sand and to make the volcanic cells. That takes energy, tremendous amount of energy, that transfers that sand to the volcanic cells. These are things that are not spoken about. The wind turbines, those wind turbines are actually manufactured. They use steel as the girth for the columns. The turbine blades, some of them are made out of fiberglass or they're made out of aluminum. So energy is there to create energy. So it's basically manipulating what we have to produce something that's supposed to be greener. When it comes to the cleanest energy around, can I just mention this to you quickly? Nuclear is the only energy that is clean. But the problem is the ramifications of the waste of it is the problem, right? And so, what is nuclear energy? Nuclear energy, all we're doing is boiling water, create steam, which then is passed over turbines, over a generator to create electricity. Those turbines, the generators have to be built. It needs energy to build these things. It needs the materials such as the iron ore, the aluminum, everything has to come out of the ground. The processing needs energy. And so when I say to you that there is no such thing as clean energy, because it requires other resources and other type of disciplines to create it. And so these are the things I wanted people to understand. When somebody tells you green energy, there's no such thing. Okay. Thank you. That's my...
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Because of time, that we want to make sure we allow a lot of questions, but that's a very good response. Thank you so much. Maud, do you want to go?
Thank you very much. So I feel very honored because of all the speakers who have spoken today, and I think getting examples of case studies that have been done in the likes of Liberia, in the likes of Ghana, has been a great plus for me here, sitting here. I come from the tourism industry, and we've been focusing a lot on how there's been an intersection between the industry and climate change, and focusing on education. But one thing I think I did not hear amongst the speakers today was, how do we bring the informal sector into this conversation? How do we educate those people who we have in large numbers on the continent, and who in essence are the people that we need to be getting to at this stage, because we're not going to make those NDCs without including them. We can talk at government level, we can talk to private sector, but we need to pull in the SMEs, the informal sector. One of the things that I see as I crisscross the continent in Africa is that these plastic bottles are a menace, an absolute menace. And how we ended up with our own local people now beginning to believe that water is not water if it doesn't come in one of those plastic bottles is a great myth. But that's because as governments, we have not made sure that clean drinking water gets to people. And remember that the people who are actually selling the water in these bottles are small businesses. So I think it's incumbent upon us at this stage to also start making sure that in this conversation, we bring them in and we include them. And of course, they are the indigenous people of the land. Thank you.
Nikome, please.
Yeah, Prof, thank you very much. And I've had the opportunity to listen to the speakers, and with particular reference to Professor Nanama Brown-Cruche, who is a revered and well-respected climate scientist in Ghana, who is championing our environmental efforts to ensure that we are able to mitigate the effects of climate change, and particularly with the environmental sanitation situation we have in Ghana, which is also peculiar in most African countries. But I would like to also say that in the past, I mean, when I started primary school in Ghana, for example, we were being taught, a subject on environmental studies. Currently, as I speak to you, that environmental studies curriculum has been taken out of our educational curriculum. We do not see our students today, the kids from their formative years, when we were taught, how to keep ourselves with the personal IG issues. We were taught about the environment in general, what we need to know about environmental education, and that's really helped us shape our thoughts and minds about how we can personally, individually contribute towards ensuring environmental, sanity in our various communities. Today, it is not there. I mean, if I walk around, travel around the world, recent times I've had the opportunity to travel to some countries, and I see how kids are able to, keep refuge, walk straight to the dustbin and drop it there. In some parts, even in the advanced countries, you'll see an inscription written on a refuge. It says, put in the bin. And you see a very educated person putting down beneath the bin. So it boils down to all what we're talking about, and we are talking about environmental education and lifelong learning. We are not only looking at the present generation, but how to sustain the old, knowledge of protecting the environment. So it boils down to the future generations, and that whatever steps that we take, we must program in such a way that the future generations will be able to continue what we are doing to ensure sustainability. So therefore, I was very much impressed with the detailed presentation made by Professor Nanama Brown-Cruche. And I'm thinking that she may be able to tell us how the EPA is collaborating with the international partners to be able to bring this education that we are talking about in the schools. It's very, very important. But I have a question for Prof. Prof, in my country, where me and you are coming from, and most parts of the world, they have this challenge about, enforcing legal frameworks that are being put in place to protect the environment. And like I've given an example, that in some African settings, even in some of the European countries, you will see people. I recently watched a clip and visit one of the states in the US, either Florida or something, where under bridge, you see people defecating live, while cars are also passing over. So it tells us that even in advanced countries, we have this problem over there. And it goes a long way to affect, the future generations there. When it comes to enforcement, we have a problem in our country in terms of, legal frameworks that have been put in place to sanction or to be able to ensure resilience in this climate fight. So EPA, what have you modeled out of how some countries which are taking lead in the environmental protection space or discipline, how are you able to inculcate some of their experiences, what they were able to do right and how they did it right to be able to, let us have that knowledge so that at least in our environmental deliberations we'll be able to know that these are the things that they did right that helped them, so we can also learn something useful from that.
Yeah. So thank you for the question and the nice comments earlier on. So what EPA does, one of the work we do is to enforce the regulations that we have passed in the country. So we have different types of regulations that we work with. It's a very difficult thing to do, enforcement, so we admit to that. Especially where you have family members, you have political powers. That's when you have, let's say, doing your work, then you get calls from the top to say you should let this one go or look into that one. It makes the work very difficult. But I believe in the fact that we need to provide the enabling environment for our citizens. So where you have created a law or a guidance to say, you don't need to use this route, it means you have to provide an alternative for the citizen to use. It's pathetic that we have very beautiful beaches in Ghana, but then you go to the beach and then you find rubbish and people defecating openly at the beaches. It's very sad. It also means that the people do not have probably a decent place to use. That's why they do the defecation openly out there. So as government, we need to provide for the people the basic or the primary needs so that you can now enforce the regulation. It's a difficult area, as I said. People build on waterways. So where the assemblies have zoned an area that maybe this is a reserve, a wetland, or a road, or a waterway, so it has to be left clear. You still find people building on waterways, in fact, filling wetland to build on. You try to educate, the powers will go ahead in doing some of these things. In fact, largely, it's people who have the money and people who have the political power who actually flout the rules. So enforcing such becomes difficult. But there are times that we do mass compliance monitoring, mass enforcement, to making sure that it doesn't matter who you are. This is the thing we are doing this week, for example, for maybe the whole week. This is the area we are checking compliance. So before you even called, if it's a demolition you have to do because you are built on waterways, you go ahead and doing it. So we try, but then we have some challenges. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to thank the organizers, Kwame, Adam, and the volunteers. It was an excellent presentation this afternoon. I have learned a lot. The speakers talked about the challenges, issues of the environment with regard to the Environmental Protection Agency and the challenges that Ghana has at the moment, and also other examples of learning of how to integrate work and workers into the training of the jobs, case of Liberia and Ethiopia and so forth. And what the challenge is, how do the young people, which is Africa now, the majority of the people are young people, how do we then think about work integrated learning, where not only the way you teach things, but how do we then identify the jobs of the future? Well, the young people also are also learning at the same time. They are also working the jobs that are ready, case, in whether it's in or other sectors. So that could be also something that we can talk about it. How do we integrate work and learning, where there could be also internships, placements, co-ops, etc., which also here in Ontario we're struggling in that aspect. There are so many jobs in many sectors, but there isn't workforce ready into employed into that. So that's also one thing I think we can learn. And the challenge, the case of Ghana, is that problems have been identified with regards to the plastic problem and the problem also of the waste and sewage and so on and so forth. Now, what is missing for me, I think it could be also a cultural of politics. I mean, Joseph have talked about challenges of that. But also, how do you then ban plastics altogether and enforce it and have targets of the problem is clear, but what are the targets and what are the barriers to enforcement, to implement them? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Hassan. Thank you. Thank you. And last but not the least, Chennai, right?
Evening, everyone. Today I was representing the 6th region, which works with what is easily 95 countries. And so listening today about all of the amazing work that's been happening in maybe only 2 or 3 countries, I was just left with the question of how do we deal with political will? The way I see it, we are still having climate change as almost like an afterthought. It's not as prioritized, it's not funded, it's not yet as real, especially in the global south. But a large part of it is political will on various levels. And I'm still stumped as to how do we shift the conversation there? And then a second part is how do we create a culture that's less of consumption and participation in the degradation, but more of, a different way of doing things, a different way of thinking about doing things. Just a simple example I can think of is that we still flush drinkable water. Like we know there are other ways of doing things, but the people with the ideas, no one invests in them, or the people getting the money from the problem are sabotaging the effect. How can we really tackle that to make it easier for the collective to start looking at a different way of doing things? So that's not a question to anyone in particular, because I think we got a really beautiful picture of the problems today, and we still haven't even scrapped the surface of a lot of that. I also work in public health, and I'm like, we are burying people linked to this, and we can't even make that connection because the data and the research is not even making those connections yet. So that's the collective question I have, everyone, because that one keeps me up at night, the political will question.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Good question. Good thoughts. All right, so as we dive into close to wrapping up, there are a couple of questions, like I said, about 25 questions here. I will try to probably pick 2 or 3, and then we can discuss it. So this is the top 3 that I have for you, Professor Kluche. So just take note, so you answer all 3 together, and then we'll come to Frank as well. So the first question, it says, is the EPA's regulatory authority being undermined by political and economic interest? So that's question 1. The question 2 said, should Ghana prioritize economic development over strict climate regulations, given its status as a developing nation? And the third question is, has the EPA failed Ghanaian communities most vulnerable to climate change, and should affected citizens have the power to sue the agency for negligence, especially with the ongoing fight against galamsey? Thank you. Kwame.
Yeah, thank you very much for the questions. On political influence on the delivery of our mandates, yes, it's not zero. Yes, we have political influence, but then we also have a mandate. So we try to play it in a way that will still carry on with our mandate, but then we need to sometimes, but not all the time, satisfy the political class. So what we do is to explain as much as possible to the power therein on the issue that they may be pleading on or they are intervening on. So we try to explain the depth of the issue and the actions we can take. So sometimes we can go a little bit liberal to going the full length of the enforcement or making sure that the corporate will have to pay for whatever environmental non-compliance issues we are dealing with. So it may be closure, paying of penalty, or to the court of law. So instead of going the full length, because of political influence, we kind of a little bit liberal on that. That is a difficult situation and very difficult to deal with. The second question is on prioritizing strict climate regulation and industrialization or something, right? Or economic growth or something. So Ghana has signed up to the Paris Agreement to reduce global warming, to cut emissions. Ghana has presented its nationally determined contribution to the UNFCCC, committing to mitigating or mitigation in general, supporting the global call. We also understand that Ghana is a developing country, and so we need to improve economically. What we try to do is, whilst we are working to develop, we advocate or we do it sustainably, which means that we developing all right, but it has to be sustainable and it has to have less impact on the environment. So we look at what we can trade off that will not be greatly impacting on our environment and at the same time not adding to too much the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So we try to play a good balance because, as I said earlier on, we have signed up to the global call to reduce emissions. So we don't just choose technologies, but we go for what will give us economic growth, sustainably growth, but with minimal environmental impact, which include the climate. The last question, an interesting one, if the EPA should be sued for probably failing. The situation at hand in Ghana's constitution, it stated that protecting the environment is the responsibility of every Ghanaian. So what EPA's mandate is to make sure that every Ghanaian is going by the constitutional code. So we advocate that we should comply to environmental rules. We come for you if you don't go by that. So if you are not complying, we come for you. Thus, we do to individuals, we do to companies, we do to every setup in the country. We actually believe that everything you are doing affects the environment. So if it's not affecting the air, it's affecting water or the land or something, which eventually affects food security, affects so many other things in the chain. So, Galamsey, mentioned here already earlier on, it's a canker on us. So I understand that there are 3 million Ghanaians who are involved in small-scale mining or involved in Galamsey. Small-scale mining is it's used. It's not supposed to, but it's used interchangeably with Galamsey, which is like illegal mining, because among the small-scale miners, I understand only about 10% are mining legally, which means they have permits to mine, which means they have registered with the EPA. We know where they are, and we are able to regulate them. But large number of the miners are not permitted, do not have the license to operate or the permit to operate. So we don't have their address. We don't know where they operate. We only find out that they have already degraded the land and they've moved elsewhere. So that's another difficulty that we have. We go around doing the monitoring. Our capacity is low compared to the frequency and the spread of the environmental degradation. So the staff of EPA, we don't have enough numbers to be on the field. Our work is bigger than just monitoring or checking illegal mining activities. It spans from the air, as already presented, to water, to land, to waste, to anything you can think of in the environment. So the section or the units or directorates that see to that mining or that sector alone, we don't have enough numbers to be out there. That's why we collaborate with other institutions like the Ghana Military Service or the Army. We collaborate with the Forestry Commission. We collaborate with the Minerals Commission and the ministries. So Ministry of Environment, Science and Technology, Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources. We work together to improve our capacity in terms of numbers and resources to go out there in this fight. I wouldn't say we have failed. I would say that we need to probably improve upon the capacity at which we work. Maybe the frequency, the resources, they are all very important in the work that we do. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. I love you already. You are very honest. I like honest answers. When the challenge is there, we have to find a way to confront it. You know, just a quick follow-up. You don't need to answer that. It's just more of a rhetorical. Now, the big nations, as you alluded to, you know, they refuse to sign the Paris Accord. The United States, for instance, doesn't see the relevance of being part of these accords. And the smaller nations end up signing these accords. Yet, the number of emissions that we even use in these smaller nations cannot even be compared to what the kind of emissions that happens in the United States, for instance, or like in China, in all those big places. So I think that we need to look at this all over again, especially African leaders, to be able to understand if indeed their effort will actually yield the result that we are looking for going forward. But thank you so much for your response to the questions. Mr. Frank, but before Mr. Frank, I want to also recognize Mr. Emmanuel Dodu, the president of Ghanaian Canadian Association. I think earlier on I mentioned him, but he was caught up in traffic. Is he? Where is he? Oh, yes. God bless you, sir. All right. So, the next question is this to Mr. Frank. Again, I have about a lot of them. Just let's see the first three that I sort of said. Do big corporations have any legitimate right to operate on indigenous land, even with consent, given the historical pattern of exploitation and broken promises? So that's the first question. The second question is, are indigenous communities obligated to sacrifice their land's rights for the greater good when those land contains critical resources for global renewable energy transitions? And then the third question is, should indigenous communities have the veto power over national development projects, even if it means blocking economic opportunities for the broader non-indigenous population? Thank you.
When it comes to corporations and the operations in indigenous lands, there should be something put by government in the sense of when you take something out, you have to put something back. My question to governments is that when a company registers with you to do work on indigenous lands, what I propose is that they have to put down a $250 million deposit in place. So that if you're going to take something out, you know, and you don't put it back, you're going to lose a portion of that deposit. And so that is one thing I think should be levied towards these corporations. Even though the riches they gain from the extraction is nothing compared to what the indigenous lands are losing. And your second question?
And the second question, let me go back there again. It said, are indigenous communities obligated to sacrifice their land right for the greater good when those lands contain critical resources for global renewable energy transitions?
I believe the indigenous population deserve the right to refuse. If the minerals under their ground is beneficial for the country, then it's beneficial for the indigenous population. But what we are facing is that corporations come, take the minerals out and take it elsewhere. It's not developed in that land. Now, if there was a way for governments to say, okay, indigenous people own this land, what is under this land belongs to them. They should have a say into understanding how these minerals are processed, what the benefit would be for them, and as a sustainable aspect of their day-to-day running, and what does the government get out of it, and also what does the companies do with taking extraction out. Now the problem is we're living in a world of greed, where money talks, and repercussions pertaining to your actions are never looked at. And this is what we face. The indigenous population is suffering right now because the agricultural sector that they used to live on or live with is gone. The water is polluted. Companies and governments know this. The corporations should be held liable for what's going on. The gold that's been extracted from the Galamsey, there should be a tax levied on that gold internationally. As we know, in Liberia, there was the blood diamonds. Remember that? What's happening in the Galamsey is very close to this, very similar to what's going on right now. It come to the point where you couldn't sell those diamonds anywhere. And so these are the things that I believe that the indigenous population have the right to say, no, you can't take our minerals. What are you going to put back? How are you going to make it sustainable? And the last one?
And the last says that should indigenous communities have a veto power over national development project, even if it means blocking economic opportunities for the broader non-indigenous population?
I believe that they should have a say in economic development or industrial development.
Well, having a say is completely different from having a veto power.
But veto, it depends how it's put to them. If a proposal is put forward to them to say, look, this is what you benefit, this is what we're going to gain as the indigenous community and also nationally. There has to be a balance. Now, if that balance is not there, I believe they have the right to say no. Okay, we have the same aspect with the pipelines going across Canada through indigenous lands. This is critical because you're going to do something to our land. What are you going to give us? Okay, what options do you give us to continue? So I believe they should have the veto, but it's up to governments and the corporations to put forward a proposal for them to understand that it will benefit them as a sustainable futures.
Awesome. Thank you so much.